Frodo. It's Mr. Bilbo's trolls.
Mr. Frodo? He's going cold.
Is he going to die?
He's passing into the Shadow World. He'll soon become a wraith like them.
They're close.
Sam, do you know the Athelas plant?
Athelas?
Kingsfoil.
Kingsfoil, it's a weed.
It may help to slow the poison. Hurry.
In The Lord of the Rings, when Frodo is stabbed by a Morgul blade on Weathertop, Aragorn orders Sam to find leaves of an Athelas, otherwise known as a Kingsfoil plant, to slow the poison that is infecting Frodo. The plant also appears in the Book of Return of the King at the Houses of Healing when Aragorn heals Faramir, Éowyn and Merry after the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and even in the second of Peter Jackson's Hobbit films as Tauriel the Wood Elf heals Kili the Dwarf. But what is Athelas? Can only kings use it? And if Sam thinks it's just a weed, is it really useful in healing? This is how Tolkien describes the scene. From the pouch at his belt, Strider drew out the long leaves of a plant. These leaves, he said, I have walked far to find, for this plant does not grow in the bare hills, but in the thickets away south of the road. I found it in the dark by the scent of its leaves. He crushed a leaf in his fingers, and it gave out a sweet and pungent fragrance. It's fortunate that I could find it, for it is a healing plant that the men of the West brought to Middle-earth. Athelas they named it, and it grows now sparsely and only near places where they dwelt or camped of old, and it is not known in the north except to some of those who wander in the wild. It has great virtues, but over such a wound as this, its healing powers may be small. So here Aragorn is saying that the plant was brought to Eriador, where Lord of the Rings takes place, from Numenor, which was an island kingdom of men raised out of the sea at the start of the Second Age. It's also where the Dunedain came from, of which Aragorn himself was one of the few remaining by the end of the Third Age. The Dunedain were descended from the Númenóreans, and were known as Men of the West, as they settled throughout Gondor and Arnor. Sam's reaction implies that the healing properties of the plant are not widely known. It's also mentioned in the Lay of Beren and Luthien, which takes place in Beleriand in the First Age. As Beleriand later sank, it seems that some Athelas survived and grew in Númenor before being taken to Eriador. The plant itself is described by Tolkien as being an evergreen herb with broad and hoary leaves, and it's likely that the main inspiration for Athelas was the medicinal herb comfrey, though it doesn't possess the fragrance that Athelas is said to have, which would come from a herb such as basil. After the Battle of the Pelennor Fields in Return of the King, Faramir and Éowyn lie gravely injured. This is what Gandalf says in the Houses of Healing. Let us not stay at the door, for the time is urgent. Let us enter, for it is only in the coming of Aragorn that any hope remains for the sick that lie in the house. Thus spake Eoreth, wise woman of Gondor. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and so shall the rightful king be known. Then Aragorn asks Eoreth, a healer in Minas Tirith, if she has any Athelas. Though she doesn't recognise it by that name, she has heard of Kingsfoil, and says, "Oh, that? Well, if your lordship had named it at first, I could have told you. No, we have none of it, I am sure. Why, I've never heard that it had any great virtue, and indeed I've often said to my sisters, when we came upon it growing in the woods, Kingsfoil, I said, 'tis a strange name, and I wonder why it is called so. For if I were a king, I would have plants more bright in my garden." She finds some in the city, as old folk still use an infusion of the herb for headaches, indicating that it still has some medicinal effect, even if it's not widely known. The fact that Gandalf says it's Aragorn himself, he who will soon be king of Gondor, who has the most chance of healing the sick, indicates that there's a mystical connection between a king and the Kingsfoil herb. It's likely that Tolkien was influenced by tales and literature referring to the royal touch of English kings and queens being in possession of powers which enable them to cure people of diseases simply by their touch. Here's a picture of Mary I of England touching for scrofula, that's an old form of tuberculosis, in the 16th century. It seems that this was a characteristic he gave to Aragorn, albeit assisted by the Kingsfoil. It's also interesting that they say that old people in Gondor use Athelas for their headaches, This shows that common people are able to benefit from it to some extent. You don't necessarily have to be a king to use it, though they seem to be using it for lesser illnesses such as everyday headaches, rather than some of the more significant injuries that Aragorn is faced with. Athelas also makes an interesting appearance in the second of Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy films, in a scene which does not appear in Tolkien's book.
Hold him down.
Tilda!
Right, that's more than enough of that. So we can see here that Kinney's got a little bit more than a headache, so according to what we understand, it would take a king's power to heal with Athelas. But Tauriel isn't a queen, she's a wood elf. Obviously some elves like Elrond have immense healing powers, but then Elrond is a descendant of elves who went to Valinor. That's angels if you like. So you could say that having Tauriel heal Kinney's wounds is taking a few liberties with the source text. Then it's obviously meant to be part of their blossoming elf-dwarf romance. Okay, that's enough on that. So we can see that Athelas or Kingsfoil is a powerful yet rare herb in Middle-earth, which is useful to relieve mild symptoms or, in the hands of a king, cure significant injuries. Thanks for watching this Lore of the Rings.